Okay, let's get started, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming. And I didn't get a chance to see the flyer that Ozzy sent out before she sent it out. And it looks like I'm going to be presenting you all with supplements. And I'm not going to present you with any supplements. We will talk about supplements. Supplements, by the way, are anything that is beyond your normal prescription. So that means a category of a whole lot. From food to supplements and vitamins. And it's interesting, the word, anybody know where the word vitamin comes from? It was coined by a Polish chemist in 1913 by the name of Funk, Cursier Funk, for vital amines, recognizing that there are micronutrients that you must have. And of course, those were the days when we recognized that a vitamin C deficiency resulted in scurvy, and a vitamin B deficiency in beriberi, and vitamin D rickets. Well, of course, shortly thereafter, the pill-making industry, as I'll call it, quickly jumped on board and now makes these substitutes that everybody thinks they can get by taking a pill to substitute rather than take the real thing. And it is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I can tell you the two main things that people take are vitamins and vitamin E. And vitamin E can get you into tremendous trouble. Tremendous trouble. For men, it can increase your risk for prostate cancer, but for all of us, both sexes, it can increase your risk for hemorrhagic stroke. So you don't want to take too much vitamin E. And just to give you, immediately, I'll show you what the tenet of our discussion today is really about. Here's the new annals of the New York Academy of Sciences, which I'm a lifelong member. Risk of excessive intake of vitamins and minerals is this annals is devoted to studies in that regard. Here's a New York Times article of only a few months ago. Choose foods, not supplements. And it talks to some of the dangers that I mentioned already, like hemorrhagic stroke and some other things. And here's an issue of the New Scientist, which is a weekly British publication. And you can see why supplements don't work. And one of the last continuing education courses I took, just before coming here, as a matter of fact, was at what's your name again?
John.
Thanks a lot. No,
Johns Hopkins.
yeah, Lucas's alumni is Johns Hopkins University, one of the best medical schools in the country. And they had a 3-day course on supplements. And they did their homework. They had every imaginable clinical trial, controlled clinical trial, randomized controlled clinical trial, and all the meta-analysis you could possibly do, which is a statistical approach to the studies that have previously been done. And not one study showed that a supplement had benefit.
What about calcium?
not one.
What about, yeah, some people think B12 is,
B12, you know, that's interesting. Let me start off with the simplest way of describing drugs, and especially vitamins. Vitamins are of two types: water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. Those get stored. They can get stored in your body. They can get stored in your fat, but even more dangerously, they can get stored in your liver. The liver is the chemical factory of your body. And the water-soluble vitamins are the B class, mainly. So with water-soluble vitamins and vitamin C, you're pretty much protected. For instance, vitamin D is made in your skin. At least it used to be made in our skin. Us old folks, our skin, as you know, is paper thin. We don't have much of a dermis anymore. And we're finding out that even though you get sun, which is necessary to manufacture vitamin D, which is necessary to keep strong bones, we can get all the sun in the world and it doesn't do very much for us. So that means you do need some vitamin D supplement. And that's a good thing for people our age to take. And like vitamin C, which we all take every day, because that too doesn't get stored. That when the body gets saturated with vitamin C, then the rest usually gets voided out through your urine. But now we're finding, as John mentions, the B vitamins, which is a water-soluble vitamins. We're finding that if you take too much in the way of B vitamins, you can get into trouble. And there was a young lady who I had to deal with before coming here, and she was telling me she was getting ringing in her ears, and everything hurt her. Whatever she touched her hurt her, and she was finding it hard actually to chew because it was painful. And I started to question her. And it turns out she was taking mega doses of B vitamins. So I said, cut them out, let's see what happens. That was it, took care of it. It made her nerve endings so sensitive. So that's another danger. And at our age, it is important for us to get a daily vitamin intake because we don't produce as much acid as we once did. And consequently, we don't digest our food to the degree we once did. And hence, the food, vitamins that we get from the food isn't getting into our bloodstream. So a vitamin a day for us is called for, recommended. Now, too much in the way of vitamins can get you into trouble. Most vitamins that we have as daily vitamins have a limited amount of the fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, so that they don't become toxic to you. But then if you're going to take 2 and 3 and 4 vitamins a day, vitamin pills that is, you're getting excess A, D, E, and K, and you'll be in trouble, really serious trouble. You can really destroy your liver. Excess vitamin E, and I know there are a lot of people who, I talk to people here who have told me they take 3 and 4 vitamin E pills a day. Well, I can tell you that puts you at tremendous risk for hemorrhagic stroke. Plus, now we're finding out it also puts you at risk if you're a man for increased risk for prostate cancer. So go easy on the vitamin E's. And as you know, we have found that people who eat a good diet, and a good diet is one with high in fish, high in vegetables, high in fruit, seem to have less disease, especially chronic diseases, including cancer, than those who don't have a balanced diet. And of course, fish supplies you with omega-3 fatty acids. But taking omega-3 fatty acid pills don't do you any good. They don't get into the body as people think. They have found that out from good studies, randomized clinical trials. The pills do nothing, but if you eat the fish, you'll get it. And then, of course, a closely related molecule, omega-6 omega fatty acids, which are found in meats, can be dangerous in high levels. The omega-3 fatty acids, we find, suppress inflammation in the body, which occurs, of course, as a result of your food being oxidized in the process of being digested. And you've all heard of free radicals, O2 radicals. And they're not good. They can cause a body to become, well, we'll be in trouble in a number of ways. So the fish diet seems to suppress your inflammation, whereas a meat diet seems to increase bodily inflammation. Now, so that's recent studies. So we know that you shouldn't eat too much meat. We evolved as hunter-gatherers, and we were lucky if we got meat every other day or every third day. But there are people who eat meat 3 times a day. You know, sausage in the morning, a hamburger at noontime, and a steak at night. And those people are at high risk for cancer. We have good data to show that. Now, there are always exceptions. Ray is an exception. He won't let fish touch his mouth, but look at him. He's here as a healthy old man.
He's dying slowly.
And by the way, you're medically old at 72. My wife was complaining to my son about not feeling well, or this bothered her, and he said, "Mother, you know you're medically old." Well, she still hasn't gotten over that statement. So anyway, there are exceptions. I have a friend who's 99. He's my father-in-law, and he's my friend. And he'll eat as much meat as he can possibly eat, never exercised a day in his life, is not overweight, and all the things that you hear about. And he's 99 and his mind is as good as it was when he was 40. So I joke about my mother, who reached the age of 100, and I said her mind is as good as when she was 20, and everybody says, "That's remarkable." I said, "Well, her mind wasn't that great at 20. So I used to tease my mother. But there are exceptions with anything.
I have a question. I've been taking a pill for vitamins over 50. You go down to the store and it has a bottle for over 50. Is that worth taking for vitamins?
That vitamin pill each day, yes.
Yeah.
But don't take more than one.
No, I just take one.
Yeah,
It's a big pill, hard to take.
That's okay. That's okay. A horse pill, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, a horse pill.
Do you want to repeat the
Zoltan?
question?
You've got to point out that you're talking about taking supplements as a prophylactic, not as taking supplements as therapy. Because, for example, if you happen to be on a poor diet, and you can define it in a variety of ways, for women with poor diets, it's really very helpful to take a pill of calcium a day. If they don't drink milk, ice cream, so forth, where are they going to get their calcium?
That's an important thing. He said make the distinction between Zoltan, pill as a prophylactic or as a supplement.
Or as a therapeutic?
Or therapeutic. And people who are on vegan diets or who have allergies to certain foods will do that as a supplement. And that works pretty much okay, but you gotta make sure your doctor's monitoring that, because you could still get into trouble. And I know some vegans that have gotten into tremendous trouble. So, again, you gotta be careful. Things that we thought were not dangerous, we're finding out are pretty. The other thing, how many people here take Prevagen? Don't. I mean, you know, here they advertise Prevagen, a substance from a jellyfish that's going to make your mind as alert as ever forever. Well, I mean, that is a relatively new drug, and that's been on the market in a very short time, and long term, I'm sure there's something in there that's dangerous, really dangerous. And by the way, let me go to the questions I posed here. Read the first question, Jack.
What role, if any, does the Food and Drug Administration play in approving supplements?
Everybody hear that? What role does the Food and Drug Administration play in approving supplements?
None.
What role do most of you think? I mean, you experts, I know, but
Zero.
zero. Not quite zero, but near zero. Supplements are treated like food is treated. And the Food and Drug Administration, if you include food, has probably 2.5 to 3 million things that they've got to attend to each year. And of course, the most important thing is, do people here realize what the role of the Food and Drug Administration is? It's one of the country's regulatory agencies in health. And its job is to, one, approve drugs that are used to treat you. And also to approve medical devices. It has a big device department, and that keeps them quite busy. And they just don't have the staff to do their job properly. I mean, a lot of my friends, and I'm sure some of you here, may have been on their approval committees for a drug. And I mean, the process leaves a lot to be desired. Because they don't have enough staff, and they don't have a whole lot of money. And we use the money to build another aircraft carrier, even though we've got something like 6 or 7 more than any other country in the world.
What role does the Department of Agriculture play in regulating the food supply? For example,
They play a role with the FDA.
is there a limit to how much carrots you should eat?
Well, they play a role with approving the safety of food. And as you know, as I just said to you, supplements are the same category as food. And how often is food recalled? Dozens and dozens of times a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you some idea. Supplements are not in any way looked at in a evaluative way. They just don't have the wherewithal to do that. Now, the FDA does step in to the supplements market in terms of asking for proper ingredients on the label. And you'll notice, in fact, Claudia was just telling me today something that she was taking said may cause cancer. And I told her, don't take it anymore. Yes. They're beginning to do that. They haven't done that in the past. And the only time the Food and Drug Administration steps in when all of a sudden Prevagen starts killing people. And it may. And that's happened several times because a lot of the supplements contain some very deadly minerals. Zinc, iron, things like that. So, a reason why I posed that question is because about 98% of the people in the country believe the FDA approves supplements. All my friends did. And I consider you my friends, most of you I'm sure did. So, any other questions about the FDA?
Well, not the FDA, but you said zinc and iron, those are bad minerals? I mean, because they usually are in your multivitamin.
Yeah, they are in limited amounts of good. The body needs it in limited amounts in terms of enzymatic action. But I'm talking about toxic levels. And of course, you know, the FDA plays a really very big role in terms of the cosmetics that you women use. So, Zoltan?
I noticed on your mail out, you had a bunch of pills at the bottom of the figure, and a lot of them were labeled zinc, ZN. And I wanted to bring up the fact that we don't have any sort of agency that can tell you whether if you take zinc for any reason or not is good. And if you rely on your physician, you won't know either. For example, how many people here take zinc? No one. Okay, how many people here take zinc because it happens to be shown to prevent colds? Okay, the data that first came out on this was 1984, and there was a 5.1% advantage of taking zinc to prevent a cold, and of course the cutoff for statistical accuracy is 5%. So you're only 0.1% above the placebo. Okay, that was 1984, but that got into the general medical literature, and a lot of physicians I know prescribe zinc at the first sign of a cold. It turns out that since '84, there have been 6 other studies, and in this mega-analysis, they found that there was a little advantage to taking zinc, but only if you took it within the first 12 to 18 hours of getting the cold. And of course, most people don't know whether they have a cold.
Yeah, and then of course, zinc can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's just like too many people are deficient in magnesium. And a lot of these are necessary, but you will get them in a good vitamin. And the vitamins have been relatively well tested. That you'll get a certain amount of zinc, and you know the old story, if you treat a cold, you'll get rid of it in 2 weeks. If you don't treat it, you'll get rid of it in 2 weeks. So, and you know, I had to deal with Linus Pauling. Everybody remember Linus Pauling?
Vitamin C. Is that right?
Vitamin C, the vitamin C guru. Linus Pauling was probably one of the most brilliant men that lived in the 20th century. He was responsible, which most people don't realize, for discovering the hydrogen bond, which is everything in chemistry. And, but he decided that he was going to, that if people took mega doses of vitamin C, and when I say mega doses, like 3 to 5 milligrams a day, I mean grams a day, and he wanted that to be part of a regimen for women who had breast cancer and had been treated. And he wanted to see if it would keep them from getting a recurrence. That was the rationale of the mega vitamin C. And he submitted a grant, since he won 2 Nobel Prizes. One for chemistry and one for peace. So at that time, I was a relatively young man at the NIH, at the National Cancer Institute, special assistant to the director. You know, those special assistant titles means you get all the shit to do. And they said, well, we've got to approach Linus Pauling because he refused to submit an application that really lended itself to a proper review. And I told him, Linus, you have to do these studies in animals. Well, I've never worked with animals. Well, you've got to start off with animals before you go to human beings. That's the way things work in the United States. Well, I don't have time for that. I'm too old. And then he did what a scientist should never, ever do, but he was Linus Pauling, and he was unusual in many, many ways. I came out here to visit him. He was at Caltech, and he said, Jack, you're going to stay at my house with me. I said, I always called him Dr. Pauling. He said, call me Linus. I said, you are Dr. Pauling to me, period. And I said, Dr. Pauling, okay, Linus, how do you think it would look if here I am coming to criticize you and evaluate you, and I'm staying at your house? Well, he called me a John Haldeman. Remember John Haldeman? I said, that really cuts me to the quick. Anyway, he was a lovely man. He had a lovely wife, 2 beautiful daughters. And because I did visit him at the house. But that we finally got Charlie at the Mayo Clinic to do a little study, because he went to the press and it was splashed all over the New York News, the Times, the Journal American, the Washington Post, even European papers, that we wouldn't fund this great, great, great man. And so we did this little study that didn't prove out at all. And by the way, mega doses of vitamin C ended up destroying kidneys.
That was a study at Mayo?
It was done at the Mayo. So.
Jack, you started talking about magnesium and ended up off the subject just as you were beginning.
Yeah, well, the body needs a certain amount of magnesium like it needs zinc for enzyme action, but you get that in a vitamin. These things have been really, very well controlled, so you don't get excess. Because again, all these metals are extremely toxic and dangerous.
Can you get enough magnesium and zinc from your food?
From your food, from a balanced diet.
So then you don't need to take a supplement?
You don't need what?
To take a supplement?
No, I'd recommend not taking the supplement, because it ends up more often than not doing the job. It's too much. I have 2 questions here. The next question is, can supplements be dangerous to your health? Is everybody convinced that it can be? Very dangerous. And as I said, the things that seem to sell more than anything, of course, are the vitamins and vitamin E. And I know some people here who will remain nameless are taking too much vitamin E. It puts them at risk for hemorrhagic stroke, which is stroke in the brain, a blowout. And also for a man, prostate cancer. But maybe it can also, we haven't found out yet, be dangerous to women in terms of cancer.
How much is too much? What's a safe level of E?
What was that question?
How
How much is a safe level of E?
400 IU, international units, a day, maybe. And I wouldn't take more than that.
Some
Do
people-
all,
That's even criticized.
Hmm?
That's even criticized by some.
Yeah, and that's
Say
even
limited to
criticized
200.
by some, because it could be dangerous to a certain individual.
do all concoctions of that have the same decay time
Decay time?
in the body?
No, that is variable. Variable in a person's metabolism. And by the way, no supplements do anything for you, and that includes vitamins, unless you're taking them with food. Take your vitamins with food. They have a much greater effect in terms of getting into the blood.
Do we all have to take supplements?
No, that's my last question. Are the supplements necessary if you maintain a well-balanced, healthy diet?
Because I've never taken anything.
Good. Well, you know, it's very hard not to have a well-balanced diet here. I mean, we get more food than we need. And Western countries, food is plentiful. As a matter of fact, we have another problem. The United States is suffering from an obesity problem. 66% of Americans are considered overweight, and maybe a third of those obese. And so that's another problem.
Okay, I wish you would talk about me that way, but anyway.
Well, you know,
Boiling it down.
if the shoe fits, Bill,
Yeah,
that's
I
the
know.
way it goes.
If the shoe fits, you probably need a bigger pair.
Yeah,
Okay.
fat feet. I have fat feet but small feet. What's next?
Okay, I don't take a vitamin. Should women be taking it for the calcium? Others, as long as we eat what we consider to be a balanced diet, is there a reason to go beyond that and take?
Yeah, my recommendation here, the recommendation by the Nutrition Committee, International Nutrition Committee, is for people who are 60, 65 and older
We all
should
all.
take a daily supplement. And there are ones designed for women and they're designed for men. Because, as I mentioned earlier, as you age, your stomach doesn't secrete as much acid as it should. And therefore, your food doesn't really get digested well enough, and you're not getting enough vitamins from your food completely. So that kind of supplement is recommended for all of us beyond the age of 65. Now, there was a time when we thought if people took 2 or 3 vitamins a day, that wouldn't hurt them. But now we know that they have control for A, D, E, and K, the fat-soluble vitamins, which can get toxic. But if you take 3, you're going to get a toxic amount. So only take 1 vitamin a day, no more.
Is there
Barbara?
a big difference in the quality of the vitamin? Rather, the $10 one at Walmart and the...
Well, the ones at Walmart are plenty good. Yeah, they're all, they've all met certain pharmaceutical standards. Safety standards too, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been to one of those factories. If you get a chance ever to do a tour of one of those pill manufacturing factories, it's fascinating.
Has it been proven that taking a vitamin is necessary?
Yes. Yes. Doing vitamins for our age, there are dozens and dozens of randomized controlled clinical trials to show that you do get a benefit.
What would you recommend?
And that benefit is that, you know, it keeps you from breaking a leg, keeps you from having anemia problems, all things like that. Jack?
Well, one of the things you're saying is that they have various medical properties. So in my case, the doctor has recommended, for example, for homocysteine, that they take folic acid, which is a B vitamin, and that because of age, it's a good idea to take a certain dosage of D vitamins because we don't seem to, we're not outdoors as much as we probably should be. So I assume that when it's treated like a medication,
Well,
it's not
when you work with
regulated.
your physician is doing blood work on you a young person every year or every other year. With us, should be every 6 months.
Mhm.
And that tells you the story. And by the way, all of you should share with your physician. And today's physician, you know, 20 years ago they didn't ask you, but today's physician almost always asks you, do you take any kind of supplements? And if so, what they are and what the dosage is. Sharon?
I have an opinion about liquid calcium. I've been taking that for osteopenia, and it's supposed to be absorbed into the body better because it's a liquid.
Yes.
I have no proof that it's working except my nails are really, really long and strong.
Yeah. Well, you know, you can get a radiograph to see if you're avoiding osteopenia. And vitamin C for women is necessary.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D and
Yes.
vitamin D. But again, you've got to be very careful.
And calcium.
And, you know, and there's a person who I don't see here, who I know is taking mega doses of calcium. Well, calcium, even if you use it as as a digestive issue, can be problematic. Can cause calcification of the valves in your heart. And by the way, that doesn't apply to the aortic valve due to aging. Diet plays no role with that. I said, hey, if you eat too much cheese, is that what causes an aortic valve calcification? Most men at 80 on will have calcification of the aortic valve. Part of life's processes, aging, part of the cycle of, you know, we started to age at the age of 30, so it's a constant process and a slow process. As my cardiologist said to me the other day, I was complaining to him about something. And he said, Jack, you think you're 21? I said, you sound like my mother. Because my mother always said, you know, you're not 22 anymore. He said, no, you're typical of everybody else. Everybody wants to get older, but nobody wants to get old. I thought that was pretty good. Yes, Carolyn?
Can you recommend a multivitamin pill or just?
Well, you go to the pharmacy down the block here or so and just ask them for a vitamin supplement, which I'll call it a supplement because it's beyond the medical prescription, and ask for one for a person over the age of 50. A woman over the age of 50 or 60, they'll supply them. Barbara?
What about the probiotic? Is that at all beneficial?
Is
The
what?
daily probiotic for digestion?
Probiotics.
Do we do anything?
Probiotics can get you into trouble too. And you know, your gut has helpful bacteria, and people who use too much probiotics end up losing the good bacteria. So, you know, if you have a gut problem and you're talking to your physician, they'll tell you what you can and can't do. But again, you can overdo. My message today is this: supplements are not without danger. And I recommend that you don't take supplements if you don't want a hemorrhagic stroke or whatever. But do take a daily vitamin. Jack?
A year or so ago, there was a lot of talk about blue zones, one of which happens to be near here. Loma Linda is considered a blue zone where people live to a great age because they eat somehow differently or live differently from the rest of us. Do you have any thoughts about
Loma
these
Linda
blue
is
zones?
Seventh-day Adventist. I gave their graduation, convocation, presentation, whatever, which I'll share with you. You'll find this interesting. Grace would kill me if she was here. It was a black tie dinner, black tie presentation. So all the husbands and wives were out there, all dressed up, women in their finery, and I was on the dais, and I got there early during the day because I was advising them on granting processes. And the Seventh-day Adventists do not eat meat. They do not have meat. They do not drink coffee or tea, only juices. And of course, they don't smoke. And I say, how do you guys procreate? Anyway, I was there for the whole day. And they, in order to make life interesting, they have pork chops in the shape of pork chops, but of course, it's legumes. It's, what's the word?
Vegetables. Beans.
Vegetarian? No?
Vegetable protein.
It's soybean.
Oh.
That's why there are so many soybean farmers. And then you can get chicken. There are chicken legs, and they look just like chicken legs. Well, at lunchtime, I had this, that, and the other thing. And then, of course, they presented the dinner, and I had that. And now the presentation was taking place. And while I was on the dais, all of a sudden I realized, my God, my stomach was blowing up like I was a pregnant woman. It was so bad I had to open my top button and my fly a little bit. And I'm behind the table. I'm with a tux too. And it got to the point where I had to move away from the table because my stomach started to hit the table. And I just couldn't wait for that president to finish his long, long talk. I was dying there. And all these guys' wives are looking at me, smiling because of what I presented. And I'm saying to myself, you're going to all be so unhappy when my body explodes and all my insides are all over your nice dress. That was my thinking. And then finally, as soon as he finished, I said to the two guys who were shepherding me around that day, get me back to the hotel fast, please. And as soon as they got me back to the hotel, they live in, that's in Redlands, where the train depot is, where all the trains, and I ran around the building, and I think I flatulated to the point where I knocked trains off the tracks, but at least it finally was relieved. So that's the kind of thing you don't realize. And when I mentioned it to them, they said, oh, Jack, we thought you realize that, you know, your gut's got to get adjusted to that kind of diet over a long period of time, and I overdosed. I overdosed on soybean, and I blew up like a balloon. They could have put me up in the air. So anyway, that was my little incident with the Seventh-day Adventists. I'll never forget it.
But you're talking about the Adventists, there are some Adventists, pretty faithful Adventists that I know up in Washington State and they don't eat the bottom-dwelling fish.
Well,
They eat
yeah.
fish, but they don't
Yeah.
eat any of the bottom.
Yeah, that's something I can't get into, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, like catfish.
Very careful with diet. you're right.
And
Very careful.
some people feel that, well, if they eat junk, the junk's gonna be in me. The dangers now with fish is that the bigger fish are very high in mercury, and mercury is toxic, especially to the brain. And we got air pollution all over the country now, and maybe even water. I remember when George W. Bush cut back on water regulation, and there was a little incident, and some Republican came up to him and said, "Mr. President, you know, Republicans drink that water too." And so finally, but we're having problems along those lines too. Well, with that, let's end it. Ray?
Do you have any opinion about the vitamin formulation for the prevention of macular degeneration?
Yeah, I'll leave that to the ophthalmologist. I'll let John talk about that. He probably.
I'm not an ophthalmologist. I did plastic surgery.
Yeah, I don't know, Ray. I can't talk to it. I mean, I know of it, but I can't talk to it. But age-related macular degeneration is devastating, and there are ways of slowing in the process.
So many of those diseases that we have there on aging basis have a long history before they become clinically evident. So that we have a problem with that in treating them. And this is where prophylaxis comes in, and how do you detect this maybe at an earlier hour so that you can put intervention in there and not prevent their thing. And today you're also getting not just the one you talked about earlier, but the fact that you can reverse Alzheimer's.
No, don't believe any of that stuff.
Well, these clinical studies are pretty good.
There's nothing really that shows. Unfortunately, we have not been successful with neurological generated diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and such.
Which our research has subdivided into various subtypes, which maybe each should be treated a little bit differently.
Yeah, all the studies I've seen, the meta-analysis studies and such, there's nothing that, you know, for instance, keep your mind active. Well, I know 2 Nobel Prize winners who ended up having Alzheimer's, and I don't know how many university professors, and nobody's going to tell me their minds weren't active.
We were always told that eating fish makes you smart.
Yeah. Well, that still seems to hold true to a certain extent.
Is melatonin considered a supplement?
Melatonin?
Melatonin.
Yes. I suppose in very minimal doses it won't do any harm. But it's a supplement, and it's got dangers. So you're taking it at a risk. By the way, of course, you all know that any drug, even drugs that are very good for you, there is no drug that doesn't have some side effects. But, I mean, if you have high blood pressure, you got to take blood pressure medication to reduce your blood pressure, or else you'll die.
Is aspirin FDA regulated?
Is what?
Aspirin FDA regulated?
No, aspirin is the miracle drug. Acetylsalicylic acid truly is a miracle substance. And so,
How is it regulated?
it's not out in any way regulated, no. But,
Well, none of the drugs are regulated. The regulation comes in the FDA determining the basic questions of Is it safe?
Yeah. Does it have
Is it
effect?
effective?
Yeah, does it have effect? It doesn't have effect. And if it kills less than 50 people, it's good. I mean, you know, nothing, there is no magic bullet for anything. And I know a lot of people look upon these little pills, these supplements, as magic bullets. And the industry that produces multi-billion-dollar industry of supplements is so happy that people think that, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
My major irritation in this relates to not biologicals, but herbals. And the herbals I really disliked ever since about 20, 25 years ago. Herbalife came on the scene.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all know about Herbalife, but that's an organization that just claimed absolute miracles for meeting their
And they were all false. And they were all
totally false.
Totally false. Now, you know, for instance, there are certain periods in life. For instance, when a woman, if Bill Spohr was here, he'll tell you that a pregnant woman should take, you know, to prevent spina bifida, a neural tube folic acid. So that is actually called for if you are pregnant.
They put that in the bread now.
Yeah. And the only other thing for people in middle age or teenagers or so, it seems that there are some nice studies to show that fatty acids, omega-3 fatty acids, seem to reduce the incidence of hyperactive disorder in some disorderly children. And then, of course, with us, we all have to take, it's recommended that we take a vitamin every day because we need it. We actually need it because even a balanced diet's not going to do the job with us.
That was gonna be my question. Should everyone after age 65 be taking a supplement,
A vitamin.
a vitamin?
A vitamin. But I caution women, postmenopausal women with calcium or hormone therapy.
What vitamin?
It's good in some people, but again, you should be under a doctor's care to do that stuff.
What vitamin do you recommend?
A daily vitamin.
It's a daily vitamin.
A daily, it's called a daily vitamin multivitamin. Daily multivitamin for a woman over 50. That's what you want.
And you just slipped under the tent.
I mean, it's, you know, you can always talk to certain exceptions. There are some people who say, well, my friend smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day and he lived to 92. There are people that do that. I asked my mother at the age of 95, Mother, do you floss? And you remember 20 years ago people didn't floss. And she said, no, I've never flossed. I said, you've never flossed? No. And she died at 100, never flossed, and she had every tooth in her mouth. Not in every single tooth.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just that way.
Well, Jack Daniels does that.
Well, I had an aunt, my Aunt Anna, I used to call them Frick and Frack. They were 2 really fun women. My Aunt Anna, who was living in a place like this, and she'd call me weekly and say, Jack, tell me a dirty joke. I'd say, Aunt Anna, how could I tell you the dirtiest joke you know? I said, Aunt Anna, how could I tell you? She's, what, you don't think I'm old enough? She said, because they all love dirty jokes here. So it got to the point where I would have, when I talked with her weekly, I would get 3 jokes from her for my 1. And she died out in the courtyard reading a book in the sun, and they came out and said, Annie, lunch is ready, and she just, that was it. And my mother died at 100 eating ice cream, laughing. So, you know, some people are lucky.
So you should be ice cream.
Well, you know, that's like the story about the scientists before a microscope, and they have taught these little flies to jump when you say jump, and then they removed the legs of the flies and said jump, and the one said, oh, obviously that when you remove the legs of the fly, they become deaf. So that's,
Thank you, Jack.
it's not easy to be a scientist. Anything else? Okay, I think we're finished.